Gurpreet, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Forgive me if I did not. What time to give your clients to see results on low, average, and high authority search results? It depends. Most of the time for low and average. Well, for low, I always mention 90 days at least before we'll start to see any significant movement. And usually for low competition, within 90 days, I can rank it, right. Get in at least the 3-pack or something, depending on what it is. For low competition, though, usually within 90 days, it's a slam dunk. It's not a problem. But I always say 90 days because I need to give. It's better to give yourself more buffer room, and then over deliver. In other words, if you give yourself, like, say it's going to be 3 or 4 months, but you can do it in 6 weeks. Don't say I'm going to do it in 6 or 8 weeks, because then what happens if it's a particularly difficult project, for whatever reason? And remember, there's a random ranking factor. So because of that, it's better off, in my opinion, you're better off to give yourself more leeway, more time. And then that way, if you perform well, if the project goes well and you get it done much faster, then that will just impress the client. You know what I mean? So for low and average, I usually say about 90 days before you'll see any significant improvement. And in high authority stuff, I always mention at least 6 months. If it's tough or stiff competition, and I'm talking about on local level, guys, strictly on a local level, but I usually say it's going to be, 6 months before we see any significant movement. We can start target. And I always mention, we can target longer tail keywords and start getting traffic from those. We can target, for example, local areas. If it's like service area and stuff like that, we can target neighborhoods or districts and things like that, so that we can catch some of the long tail, lower competition traffic while we build on working towards the higher competition traffic sources. But the other thing is, remember, I always recommend, especially with SEO projects now, for any new client, I always recommend starting off with a mix of both AdWords and SEO, so that they can get results immediately from the PPC traffic while you're working on the SEO, guys. Because in my opinion, now that I know AdWords, which I avoided for many, many years, but now that I know it, I like the fact that I can produce results immediately for a client, like literally within a week. I can have leads coming in for the client while I'm working on the SEO. So I like to factor that into my proposals now, and just state right up front that a portion of whatever their monthly fee is going to be going towards AdWords while I work on the SEO, because there's a lag time between the start date of the SEO project and when it starts to produce results. And in the meantime, I want to backfill that time with leads. And the only way that I know how to do that very efficiently is with AdWords. And so, it'll be front end heavy now, the proposals. When I go to do any sort of take on new client, I'll do a proposal for both setup and monthly services, as well as an AdWords budget. Even if it's a small budget to begin with, I always add that to the proposal, so that and explain exactly what I just explained to you. So what do you guys have? What's your opinion on all that?
Well, it's actually a good question. Like, first off, there's the whole thing of managing expectations, right? If you're doing SEO, the client needs to have really clear in mind that there's faster ways of getting traffic while SEO kicks in, as you were correctly saying, Bradley. So you need to manage expectation correctly. I think that's step number one. And then I always say that it all depends. Like, I don't base my SEO campaigns for clients when I do them on rankings, but rather on visitors, exposure, traffic, those kind of things, and sales at the end of the day. But that's another story. So because I don't like to promise stuff that I cannot control, like Google's algorithm. But there's some things that we can control, which is the amount of keywords that you can rank the client for. Like, meaning if you can set up new keywords, new content, long tails, etc., that's something that you can control. What you cannot control is where the client is going to land on the search results, right? So I always like to manage expectations from the get-go, so that, and I totally agree with Bradley in terms of, give yourself some time. If you know that this is going to be an easy project, give yourself some time so that you can actually, exceed expectations and say, yeah, this guy promised me 2 months, but in 3 weeks we were already ranking. Okay, so you have a card up your sleeve, if you would.
I would add that you trickle. Like, don't just, if you have a budget and it's a set budget and it's a low budget, then you start trickling in the traffic. I never promise that I am going to put them anywhere in the search results. The conversation never happens, and if it gets brought up, I move it to results that they're going to see it in their bottom line rather than, oh, you're going to rank for this keyword and that keyword, and you're going to get this many visitors and all this other crap that you have no control over. What you can do is, just like it has been said, you can turn on ads. You can go to Facebook. You can go to you can even go to Bing, depending on the niche, and start doing ads and start delivering some leads while everything else kicks in. But I mean, you never, ever, ever bring search results and keyword placement into the conversation, or you're going to be screwed if you don't deliver.
Yep. I agree. Roman, your take.
I agree with Hernan. I really, really like what he said about expectations. If you think it's going to take you 3 months to rank something and you set the expectations for 6 months, it gives you a lot of leeway.
Yep.
And you're not going to have a pissed off client as long as you're managing expectations. So that's
right.
That's a really important thing. If you set your expectations to 3 months and something happens and you can't deliver in 3 months, well, you're in trouble. And that's, in my experience with client work, that's really, really important, is expectations.
Yep. I totally agree, because that's the thing, guys. And the problem, I was chatting with one of our mastermind members earlier today, in fact, who just lost a client that had totally unrealistic expectations. And he approached me, the mastermind member, to ask me for some help and some guidance on how to handle these two different clients that he's having some issues with. And one of them, and this was just last week, and then one of them, and I'm not going to reveal your name, buddy, so don't worry. One of them that he was talking to me about last week just had actually just fired him or whatever, let him go. And he told me that just this morning. I read the email that he replied to me and mentioned that. And I said, I'm sorry that you lost the client. That sucks. But on the other side of it, her expectations were completely unrealistic, and she would have been a shitty client no matter what you did for her. And he came back and said, I have to agree. Basically, you're right. She was a shitty client, and she would continue to be. No matter what, you bend over backwards, jump through hoops, those types of clients are never going to be happy. And so, and that's in part because of what Roman and Hernan were both mentioning about setting expectations, guys. You have to set expectations right up front. And that's the problem. If you start to set expectations up front and you start catching resistance to your expectations, or people want to speed the process, you're going to have to let them go, because even if you talk them in at that moment into hiring you or purchasing your services, it's going to be just a matter of days or weeks before they start to resent the purchase anyways, because they were impatient initially, but yet you talked them into it. And I'm reading this book right now, guys. Well, I've read it once. I'm going through it a second time now. In fact, I'll probably reread it several times because it's so damn good. But it's for anybody that's doing client work, go get Bill. I think his name is Bill Good. Hot Prospects is the name of the book. You can buy it on Kindle for $10. It's called by Bill Good, Hot Prospects. Wayne Clayton, one of our mastermind members, pointed that out to us, and one of the mastermind members where he was a guest presenter about a month or two ago. And I picked up the book and started going through it, and it's fabulous. And one of the things that Bill Good teaches within that within the book is to get right off the bat, eliminate any what he calls pits, or just flat out, jerks, like people that are going to be difficult. Like, you don't want to try. In the old traditional way of selling is to always overcome objections. And when somebody says no, it's just because you haven't provided the proper rebuttal, that kind of stuff. That's it. I like Bill Good's approach from Hot Prospects, which is, don't do that. Like, if somebody gives you resistance, cut them, knock them off the list, man. Go right for the next potential prospect, because those people, even if you convince them to purchase your services or to hire you or whatever, they're never going to be satisfied, and it's going to be a pain in your ass. And trust me, I've done it many, many times during the course of my career. And I'm sure most of those on this webinar now have done the same thing, where they've followed the dollar instead of their gut feeling, and it's caused them a ton of heartburn or a headache. And I totally recommend that you guys, set expectations right up front. And that's also a great way to qualify or disqualify a potential prospect for services. Because if during the time that you're trying to set expectations, you start to catch resistance, doesn't mean cut and run right off the bat, because you can still salvage a good sale at that point if it's just like a minor issue or obstacle that can be overcome. But when it gets to like expectations, especially if you can tell that or feel that they're impatient and that kind of stuff, guys, I'm telling you, the best thing to do is walk away and go find another prospect. Some will, some won't. So what? Someone's waiting, right?